Welcome to Conversations in Between the Realms, a podcast where the mystical meets the everyday. Join Amanda Nova and Beth Renov each week as we dive into the profound journey of awakening, sharing our experiences, insights, and the lessons that guide us toward our divine purpose. Together, we awaken and guide our souls and others, exploring the magic of living in the 3D while staying connected to the higher realms, embracing the challenges, and celebrating the growth. You've been guided here for a reason. Trust in the journey and let the unfolding begin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Conversations in Between the Realms. I'm Amanda Nova and I am here with my co-host Beth Renov, and today we're going to be talking about authenticity, and in true authentic fashion. This is the second time that we are recording this. We recorded it yesterday and the universe stepped in and was like, no, this is trash. No, I'm just kidding. They were like, no, this needs to be done on 2/2/2, which is today. We are recording on February 2nd, February 22nd. God. And that's where we're at. So we're going to talk about authenticity. So how are you? How are you doing? How are you showing up in the world today?
Authentically, I'm a mess.
Yeah, not well.
It took me, I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like I'm Mr. Bean and I'm like smashing into everything. Like I try to do one simple thing and it just like never goes right.
Yeah.
But authentically, I feel like I'm in a weird place, but I feel like this makes me feel better. So I look forward to this, and it's just like something that brings joy into my life, and I'm trying to do more of that. So yeah, that's where I'm at. What about you?
Yeah, I think same. I think I am trying to figure a lot of things out. Like I think a lot of people are. I think the energy in the world right now is really, really crazy, and just so many things going on. And then at the same time, there's so many things. I just had posted about this when we got off of our call yesterday and got cut off of our call. There was a crazy intersection of energies, and it just was so interesting to me because we are in this process, so many of us, of figuring out who we truly are. We're trying to figure out how to show up in the world. We're trying to figure out our identities. We're shedding all of the past identities that we put on ourselves. And it's all happening on this collective and personal level. And so I just feel like I have been walking in and out of different realms and portals. Like we talk between the realms. Like I feel like every time I walk through a door, I'm in a different timeline or something. So I don't even know how to show up as my authentic self right now because I don't know who that is sometimes.
Yeah, I think to what you're saying, like one day I'm really motivated, I'm feeling really aligned. I'm like, okay, I'm like manifesting and attracting and being magnetic to the things I want. I'm really making my dreams come true. And then all of a sudden I have this slide back the next day. I let things get to me. I let my negative feelings overwhelm me. And that's part of being human in this 3D realm, right? But then like some days it's so easy to be in the 5D.
Yeah.
And it's just like, is that a timeline? Is this the process? Can we like make it go forward so I can just be authentic already? But maybe the authenticity is really the process of it. And just being that human, like in the 3D while having this connection to the 5D and trying to live to that highest self, trying to attract everything that we are trying to bring so that our gifts can really come out and we could do the good in the world that we want to do.
Yeah. And it makes so much sense. And I've been hearing this so much lately from people. And the wording that keeps coming to my head is this idea of starting and stopping. This idea of I'm starting down this path and then I feel like a negative feeling comes up or a negative belief or a past pattern comes up. And I think the truest form of ourselves is riding that wave of accepting that there are some times where we're going to feel like amazing. We're going to feel like creating everything. And then there are times where we are not going to feel that way. And it's cyclical completely. And accepting that, because we're right now in a world, in a society that makes us feel like we need to be productive all the time. We need to be
Mm-hmm.
creating all the time. And if you're not, then you aren't good enough. You aren't these things. Or if you are a spiritual person, if you are not feeling in it all the time and you're not always floating and feeling namaste and one with the universe, then you're bad and you're doing something wrong. But the natural flow of the world, the earth, the moons, everything being in flow, even as a woman going through a cycle, is understanding that there are times of darkness, there are seasons, and there are times of spring and creation. And that's just natural. That is authenticity.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Because if you think about the seasons, like think about winter, like fall going into winter, but
Mhm.
then spring. And if you think of astrology, like we're about to go into like the new year,
Mhm.
when things blossom, when there's creation happening. But there's a purpose of, having that darker or downtime and that hibernating almost, because that's like your time for self-reflection. And
Mhm.
it's just like that's the larger like drawn out process, but we could have little ones of those every day.
Right. Yes. And I think understanding that the work is being done whether you're in a super magnetic or creative space, or if you are in a dark or reflective place, or if you are just feel like watching TV, and just
Mhm.
hanging out, or you just want to lie in the dark. I mean, sometimes I know both of us get migraines. Sometimes I just want to
Mhm.
be in silence in the dark. Just
Yeah.
lie, like I just have to. And my soul is doing stuff during that time. There is work still
Right.
being done. It's like, we briefly talked about before we hopped on about dreaming, and we can go into that. This was not the segue I imagined, but we actually, our spirits and our souls do work whether we are productive or not. And there are those of us who work in the dream space, and so we're sleeping and our soul is doing something. We're in this like deep reflection period, or this dark time, and our soul is doing stuff. So there's always things in motion. There's always work that's
Right.
being done.
Right. And it's like the behind the scenes work that, and I say this like when I do therapy with clients, it's so, and I really think that it's so connected to spiritual work too, because it's like you're not digging a ditch, so you don't feel the pain in your
Mhm.
your arms. You don't see how deep you're digging a hole, but like so there's no tangible evidence, I guess, to what you're doing, but there's so much work going on behind the scenes. It's when you can connect and have a moment in like without sleeping,
Mhm.
or even having a dream that like is so vivid and it makes you feel something, and you're like, oh, that was a connection.
Mhm.
And having a reaction to something that's different, approaching things in a different way, having money flow to you, like kind of like we were talking
Mhm.
yesterday. We didn't get to that in this conversation yet,
Yes.
but like when you actually manifest things, you're like, oh, the work has been done. It's not just
Mhm.
saying it out loud, it's what that manifestation, that spiritual practice does after you do it,
Mhm.
right? So the work is going on even though you can't see it.
1,000%. And it's funny because I say that about Kundalini all the time. That's part of my opening
Mhm.
spiel when I do a class or when I work with somebody, that once you commit to making these shifts, to allowing your soul to be, to be connected with your body and be a part of this whole awakening, after you receive these energetic upgrades, after you receive an activation, after you have a download, after you have a dream, the energy is running on its
Mhm.
own behind the scenes. So things are happening. And so it is just about looking for those things like we were talking about last time, like those signs and synchronicities. I
Mhm.
think that people struggle with finding their authenticity in the spiritual realm of things because of what we were just saying, because they feel like it has to be connected all the time, feels like they have to be this certain way. And also because it isn't scientifically based, I think a lot of us struggle with what's happening. Like, what is really happening?
Right.
Is this real? Is this something? Can this really be who I truly am? Because it feels so unbelievable sometimes.
I mean, I think it is scientifically based. They are studying this, and there
Mm-hmm.
is like quantum physics and quantum theory. There's also, I think, something called telomeres, which Deepak Chopra talks about. I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure Joe Dispenza talks about when you meditate. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything more spiritual than meditation,
Mm-hmm.
so it is science, but again, like it's a process. It's your spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And you have to start somewhere. So for some people, it's only in their dreams because maybe that's the safest place for them
Mm-hmm.
where they don't feel judged, where there's no like imposter syndrome yet. So it's like, okay, I can start here, and then as you accept that and you become more comfortable with that feeling like authentic to you in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think authenticity is on a spectrum too, is like, here's where I start and this little bit feels
Mm-hmm.
really authentic.
Yeah.
And maybe then it gets to something outside of dreams, right? So it's this whole process of unfolding and seeing how spirituality manifests in your life, and maybe it's a gift of like being psychic, maybe it's a gift of mediumship, maybe it's a gift of channeling, but maybe it's a gift of creation.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that so many people fear coming out of the spiritual closet in a way because of
Mm-hmm.
what you mentioned. There's a lot of protections that we put on ourselves from past life trauma, from this life trauma, from generational trauma that prevents us from stepping fully into these roles with these gifts. Most people that are listening to this or who are doing this type of work have been doing it their entire lives, but they have been so afraid to fully step into that or to truly understand what it is. Because a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
it's things that when you it was happening as a child, you didn't understand it, but you're so afraid of it because of the programming and as a way to protect yourself that you never are fully able to step into that authentic version of yourself, allowing the gifts to come through because you're so afraid of persecution, of ridicule. I mean, think about the way that some mediums get made fun of this day and age. Let's not even bring up witches being burned. I
Right.
mean, that's, all real stuff. I mean, hundreds of thousands of women were killed in Europe and here as well. But even in this lifetime, like the way that we ridicule people who do this type of work, we call them snake oil salesmen. So we put a block on our gifts so they don't come through as strong. So once you start shedding those layers to open that up, then you're in a world of, oh my God, what's happening?
Right. And honestly, it can feel a little bit overwhelming when it does come in
So
and you accept it, because you're
overwhelming.
like, whoa, didn't expect this, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just and I think the more you understand yourself, and like I think the self work goes with the gifts coming in and truly being in an authentic place,
Hmm.
because shadow work,
Hmm.
what are the dark parts of ourselves that we keep hidden,
Yeah.
and why are they there? Why do we have some behaviors, that we don't understand? Why does this situation keep happening in my life,
Hmm.
and it can be past life, it could be ancestral, it could be from childhood trauma,
Hmm.
but you have to figure that out, because then you're opening up yourself up a little more, you're removing blocks that really were there to protect you, but you've outgrown that coping mechanism,
Right.
and maybe you made a contract in a past life, like, I don't ever want to feel this pain again, because
Hmm.
whatever happened to you, maybe you were persecuted as a witch,
Hmm.
right? You had a really interesting past life come up this week,
Yeah.
where you were like a Russian author,
Hmm.
and it's so interesting because at that time there was nothing the poets, the writers did wrong. They were just speaking truth.
Hmm.
But that was seen as wicked because
Yep.
it was going against what the dominant force, the authoritarians, didn't want. They wanted full control over people. So even something like poetry, which I think is magic, it's like, where does that come from? I believe all
Right.
art is channeling,
Right.
right?
And
So
words, 100%.
words have
Hmm.
such vibration, so it was probably attracting something that was threatening to them,
Hmm.
so you had this experience where you were being whipped and beaten
Hmm.
and thrown in the gulag, basically,
Yeah.
and you made a contract with yourself. I will never put myself in this position again. I need to protect myself. And you said you've been really having a hard time using your words because you did this in a past life.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because this past life came up when me and Beth were talking about physical pain that I was having and feeling super duper blocked from a creative perspective with writing, because I've been channeling a book that's been coming through, and writing has been, I mean, I got so emotional when we were talking about it, and I probably will again, because it's so, writing is a deep, deep love of mine since I was a child. Like, I always had a notebook in hand, always. And it's just always been something that I've just deeply loved. I just have connected with words. It's just so meaningful to me on so many different levels. And I have been feeling really blocked to allow that expression to come through. And when I went into meditation, and I do a lot of deep hypnosis type of meditation, that's really what I like, because even if I'm going to do Kundalini, and those who have worked with me, and Beth, you have experience as well, I always get people in with meditation. Not all Kundalini facilitators do that, but I kind of, I like to get you do the induction, get you in deep so you can fully surrender and allow yourself to go wherever your soul needs to go. And I do that with myself. And I just was getting these visions of being pulled side to side, being whipped, like experiencing that. And I was having pain in my back. And so when I went to Beth and was like, this is happening, the life didn't need to come through. I knew that there was a contract, there was something coming through, but I couldn't piece it together. And then Beth pieced it together, and we were like, oh, this is something that I was holding on to, preventing me from fully expressing myself. And breaking that contract is something as simple as writing it on a piece of paper or ripping it up or lighting it on fire. And I want to say, in regards to all of this, because I have felt so much better since we did that, like went through that ritual. But I want to say, we talk so much about witches and burning times and persecution, and all that is real. But in our work, we see blocks that come up like this. That's like, a poet being persecuted. Ooh, and a glitch just went on this screen. That was really weird. A white flash. Okay. Also things, I see a lot of people that were oracles in past lives. I see a lot of things come up about people just using food and herbs. I have like all of these. Beth probably does too, but I see all kinds of crazy stuff with people that isn't always the traditional witch wound. It's really just about this persecution of you being who you are. And most of the time in those lives, we didn't realize what we were doing. We just were expressing ourselves, and then we are killed, persecuted, whatever it is, locked up. I have people in prisons all the time for being oracles, or I see women who use their bodies as dance, and all of these things. We hold on to that stuff, and then we get here and we're like, no, we're not going to allow ourselves to be our true selves, because being our true self equals pain for our loved ones, equals all of these things that impact and threaten our survival and our safety. And so we hide ourselves, our true selves.
Right. And it's like processed as danger, right? So, it really was an armor for you to have this contract to protect you from ever being in that situation. But that armor is a coping mechanism. It manifests as that here, but it really just winds up doing exactly the opposite of what it's intended to do. So you have to drop that armor, and the way to drop the armor is to tap in, because then like this armor is just preventing you from being authentically who you are and showing up authentically and figuring out what your purpose is, what makes you feel alive. Like, what are you here to do?
Yeah. What do you truly, truly love doing? And something we talked about yesterday, and, I just, as I was saying this, I was thinking back to that, we talked yesterday about what you love to do as a child. I think that before the world tells you these things aren't okay, right? These things are bad. We come in with those nerves about it, but it slips through so much more as a child. And so I do think that there are multiple ways to figure out who your soul really is, who you truly want to express yourself as in this moment. And a lot of those things I think do go back to childhood, because that's where that's often beyond the past life stuff. That's often where we're shown that the things that we want to do are bad. That's where we're shown that things are wrong. I mean, so many people, I'm sure in your line of work more than like in your past life line of work, but people who think that they are inherently wrong or not good enough or unworthy because they had a parent who had a crazy temper or who yelled at them or they got in trouble for doing things wrong. I mean, so many people like just feel like they're in trouble just naturally. You know what I mean?
You know, and it could also be developed from that past life, right? It's like, I'm not good enough or I'm not safe. Like all these core beliefs, and a lot of them, you know, if you want to just stick in the 3D, are from childhood, and nothing bad could have really happened to you. I have so many people who come to me and they're like, I didn't have a traumatic past. And it's like, you don't need to. It's just the lens through which you interpret and internalize a situation. So maybe it's that your parents got angry and you're like, it's my fault, I'm not a good enough child. Maybe you didn't do as well as you wanted to, and you feel like love comes from your parents being really proud of you for doing well in school. And it's not that your parents necessarily put pressure, but that's just how you internalized it. So then that you carry that throughout your life, and then you operate from that place of fear. But like when you're a child and you don't really have that yet, you're still 1 foot in the 5D and 1 foot in the 3D. That's why kids have gifts come through. They say things that they're like, you're like, what? You know? Like they're like, I just saw my dead grandpa, you know? Like, and you're like, okay. But, you know, when someone messaged us yesterday saying, you know, my kid has these gifts and they can see, like, I don't know that I'm doing the right thing. And it's like, all you can do is support them so that they don't have this programming that you're wrong, this isn't real, don't accept part of yourself. That is such a gift in this world. And, you know, tap into the things, even like for me, singing, dancing. Like I was that kid who wanted to be on Broadway, but I was like, that's not cool, you know, as I got to middle school and high school. So I shut that down for myself. It's like I received it from myself because I just wanted to fit in versus belong. And, you know, now I'm going back to singing. Like music has been hitting me in a way. And I really feel like it's a time machine. It brings me back to like childhood when I felt freer, when I didn't have all this armor on me, you know, and I would belt out songs like for hours, you know, and just like entertain myself. I don't know that everybody else appreciated it, but I also didn't care.
Right. Because you don't have that programming. And I do think a lot of those things, like, you know, and this is why we are in between the realms, because that's the 3D expression of things. And then from the 5D perspective, if you had a past life and that trauma happened, you're bringing it into this life as a karmic cycle. It's coming up so that you can relearn that lesson, because you didn't learn that lesson in that past life by putting that protection on. So then you come back here and you're like, all right, I'm coming in here to break these karmic cycles. Because, you know, I can say like a lot of the people who have these gifts, when they are younger and the gifts do come up and they do present, there are often things that have happened where they feel like it's not right, or it's not religious or not holy to have those things, or they've been told that it's wrong. So then they shut them down. People who have clairvoyance, the way that I always see it in a metaphor, is they have a camera in their third eye. That's how I see it. And the lens is on. And sometimes the lens is foggy when there's a block, but a lot of times they have the lens on. And I'll say to them, take the lens off. You are safe here. You have to feel safe enough to allow those messages to come through. That's how you're going to connect, because we put protections on all of our gifts. But if you have a natural innate, first of all, I want to say to every single spiritual being that is here in a physical body has access to gifts, has access to them. Some gifts are more developed than others. I just talked to a client about this. It's like a muscle. It's like, you know, we rely on certain ones. Some are innate, you know, and not everybody is, you know, I don't know, the LeBron James, right, of each thing, right? So like, I mean, you know, there are certain things when you see people, you're like, oh, but we all have access to those gifts and we all experience them in different ways, right? So when those things come through and you're told that they're wrong or they're bad and we put blocks on them, that's how, that's how we sort of protect ourselves, but that's how we shut them down. So if you want to have access to those gifts and open them up more and more, you have to shed those layers and those beliefs and all that programming. And that's the shadow stuff. You got to pull that off and say, well, why do I believe that this is bad? Why do I not feel safe to do this?
Mm-hmm. And it's not going to be a one-shot deal. It's like, I saw this yesterday, I see it again. It's like a carpet rolling out. It's going to unfold. And as you pull back a layer, more is going to come up. But the first step is feeling safe, right? So like, let's just take the dreams, for example. It's feeling safe that you're not crazy. These dreams, something's real, and you can connect with it. And I think also another first step is going back to the things that you loved in childhood. Try doing them, see how you feel, where do you feel it in your body, and make that imprint of this is positive, right? And just start finding the joy in life, because I think joy brings in gifts,
Yeah. What do you love?
Right, totally. So I think if you can start there, and then it's so unique to each person. I would love to have like a step-by-step process for everybody that's blanketed, but we're all unique human beings. And like, even if you do the exact same thing as someone else, it's like your signature is on it. And you have to figure out what that signature is. You have to believe you're good enough, that you're unique, and figure out how you're unique. Like I'll take therapy, for instance. Like, it is a gift because I've been really great with words. Like, I must have channeled from when I'm a child, because I just know the things to say, and I have no idea where they come from. I love to sing. That's from my voice. It makes people feel something, so my voice has always been something. But when I was in therapy, I really struggled in the field, because I was like, I don't do things how everybody else does. And I was so worried I was doing it wrong. But the minute I was able to have my own practice, it felt so right, because I could do it in the way that I wanted to. And it was not like other people. Like, and everybody, and it's like, there are a million therapists out there, but there aren't necessarily a million therapists exactly like me. And then even going into being psychic and accepting that, having mediumship and clairvoyance and all my clairs, like, it was really scary to accept. And then I tried to do it like everybody else. Like, I went to people to try and learn, but it never felt right, because I'm just someone who needs to do it in my own way. You're the same, but I'm never going to be that person you come to. I'm going to like tell you who comes through, and then like, that's going to be it, and just have a message. Like, I need to have more. So like, once I accepted that about myself, I'm able to do this in such a way that's so authentic to me. And like, when you started out with breath work, like, I think you felt that box, and we put ourselves in these boxes because we have the label, which we talked about yesterday too. Is like, okay, I'm a therapist. I have to do it at how everybody else does. I'm a clairvoyant. And maybe that's why I didn't want to use those terms. They never felt authentic to me, because I'm like, but I'm kind of like not that. First of all, everybody's psychic. It's just whether you tap into it or not. And I think that's intuition, so everybody has that capacity. It's just, how much clutter is there? And then if you want to use that, it doesn't mean you have to be someone who just tells someone their future or what's going on or reading their mind. It's how can you use it in a way that's so unique to you?
Sure. And I think that's, you just hit on something that's such a big thing right now, especially in the social media realm, in this realm of an awakening, because there are more and more people getting into spirituality. 10 years ago, this wasn't really the thing. It was more, I remember I would have to drive an hour to like go see someone who did anything with spirit guides. And it just like wasn't like a big thing. And now it's becoming more and more. And many people getting into this work, they fear the oversaturation. They struggle to find their place. And both you and I have been through this, because once your gifts start opening up, you do start to be like, well, where do I fit in with all of this? I know Beth began with reading tarot cards, but she would have the cards and then she would do intuitive readings, that they were like kind of there for you as like a little like, crutch. And it was the same thing with me in breath work. If you remember my early Kundalini activations, I always did holotropic breath work. I don't do it anymore because I don't need to do it anymore. But it was kind of there as like, oh, well, this is going to get people to where they want to go, but I don't even need it now. I just accepted that this is how things come with me. So I think that it's definitely learning the way that you receive information and energy, because like you said, everybody is psychic. People receive things differently. And so like understanding those things and just accepting that you can be your own version of, there is no such thing as oversaturation. Nobody is you. Nobody has your unique signature, your unique imprint. You are going to be able to make anything your own. So it doesn't matter that there's a million people doing human design, that there's a million people doing astrology. You know, I sometimes talk about astrology, but I'm not an astrologer. But and Beth knows this, I was in a phase a long time ago where I had to be everything and do everything. Now I'm just like trying to be like, 5 years ago, I would have been like trying to learn everything about astrology. Now I'm just like, what does it feel like for me? And like, how do we, utilize these tools? So I think it's thinking back to childhood. I think figuring out some of those things from an inner child perspective, what caused, what brings me joy, what did I love, what do I still love today. And then I think it's also just doing a little bit of a check-in, which can be, a meditation or just kind of getting quiet and just thinking about how your body and spirit energy receives information. Because I think that's another piece about all of this is not every person who relays information is also good. And I just want to say that too, because you also go through a phase in the spiritual journey where you trust others more than you trust yourself. So when you are realizing your authenticity, it's also learning what feels right to me, what feels real. How does that feel? Is it a tingling in my stomach? Is it like Beth tingling on the crown and her legs going crazy? I get a chill, or I just know things sometimes, or I can write it out. There are different things. I've had to, grow those gifts, but it's what does this feel like for me? Does this feel good? Does this feel true? And just starting to really feel into that, because the truest, most authentic version of you is that intuitive version of you, but it's not letting others put their stuff on you too. Nobody is going to tell you who you are. You have to figure that out.
Right. And I would just add that, how do I receive information right now? Because that can change as you open up your gifts. At first mine was just a knowing, right? And maybe channeling it, but I didn't realize it was. But it's as you accept more and more, it's when I just knew something, it was in my chest, and it was just it was almost like this thing where I had to say things, and it was just this deep knowing inside. It's I know I'm Beth, so I know that it feels exactly the same, right? So, and then as you accept yourself more and more, and I think there's an acceptance piece, your gifts come out, and yours was like that too. So, and I think really hit on the nail on the head with, not everybody does this in good faith, and you have to be discerning.
I just felt that. Yeah, we need to talk about that, I think. Yeah.
Right. That's a whole other one. Yeah. But, you're going to talk to people, and, the people who don't go through their own stuff and really understand and clear out the clutter, they may have a gift, but some of their stuff might be getting in the way. So if it doesn't feel right, and you have to figure out what feels good and what doesn't, and if there's a nagging in your head that's this doesn't feel right, trust that. And a lot of this is also starting with learning how to trust yourself. How do I know when something's right? What's the feeling? How do I know when something's wrong? And can I trust that and run with it? And with my clients in therapy, I'm okay, how do you know when what you want to order is the thing you want to order? If you're ordering at a restaurant. And I start with really small things. So maybe you could start with that and attribute it to spirituality and gifts and learning to trust yourself and going back, like we said, to those things that brought us joy when we were a kid.
Yeah. And think about the way that you've received information since you were a child. One of the things that was so opening for me was, and realizing that this is normal, some of these things. When I was younger, I used to have moments where I was about to fall asleep and I would hear footsteps and doors slamming. And I never knew what that was. And I was pretty intuitive as a kid. My parents would call sometimes and I would be they'd be oh, we're going to be home soon. Sorry, you're home alone. I'd be I'm not home alone. My grandfather's here who passed. I had crazy, I was that kid. But I never knew what that was. And then I was reading a book a few years ago where I learned that was clairaudience, was that like, and the person said that they had those experiences. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. Then I spoke to my father and learned that my father had been having that his whole life. And so we think about the way that you've received things, or the way that things have opened, or the way that you just knew things, like how little kids get like weird around adults and stuff. I think it's just really fascinating to kind of get into that perception of how things feel. And I'm going somewhere with this. We were talking about dreams, and we're talking about people blocking their authentic self. So my dad is going to be like the star of this podcast, but I just wanted to say, my dad is very religiously spiritual, and he, in his family line, and I've learned this through working with Beth as well, the gift of oracle, of sight, of the inner sight, comes from that side of the family. And to the point where if people in the family ignore it, they have eye problems down the line, which many of my relatives had. So this morning, my father says to me, I had a really vivid dream last night. It was so, so crazy. And you were in it. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, what happened? I know that he's psychic. He's just not like accepting it and open in this world with it. And he said that I walked up to him and I said, I missed you. And
Aww.
I know. And I don't know. Now I'm really freaked out about it. But I just want to say, like, it was a moment for me where I was like, this man who cannot fully express that because he was raised that religiously, that's wrong, is still receiving information via dreams. That's how he's receiving the information. So it can be it doesn't matter when you open it up. You have to just look at, how do I receive? How does it come through for me? And maybe it probably has been happening your whole life.
Yeah. And just to speak to your dad's dream, that's because your dad is actually like accepting it. Like the fact that he came to you and told you about it, that he recognized it was a vivid dream, like you missed this version of him, And I really do believe our families, like we choose, and somewhere along the line, like you guys were together and he was authentically himself and he shut that down. Like I think that he happened to go into a religious family where it was shunned upon because of something in his past life, right? And I think you're here to open that up in him and to reunite in some way.
Yeah.
And
Ooh. Yeah.
yeah, you're
Not
like,
to
I
make
got
this
the cue.
about me, but yeah, I did. But yes, and it's just really just to even, and this is how our conversations like go. And so after we talked about that, then we got into this like crazy conversation where he wanted me to explain to him what I believe happens with souls after death. And we talked about how and I was telling him, you chose your parents, you chose like, these are the things. And so we did have this like really powerful conversation. And as we had talked about in the first episode, these conversations with my dad usually open portals and crazy stuff happen because his line ancestrally, there's witches and all kinds of stuff. I mean, they literally call themselves like the Strega Dinola, like that was what they call themselves. Nobody in my immediate family knows what any of it means, but they just like ignore it. They're just like, they were witches, haha. So, these things start to come out. So, we are the cycle breakers. We're here to break the chains. We're here to feel into that. We are here to do that work. And so I think that, revisit some of those old things from childhood, revisit what brings you joy, revisit what start to feel into your body, how you receive information. I think that's a really good practice. Even as we're speaking, I mean, everything might not resonate with you, and that's okay. Some things are for you and some things aren't.
And it's taking inventory of, this feels right, this doesn't, and I don't need to take on what doesn't. And it's also establishing boundaries, like spiritual boundaries. It's like, what energy am I going to let in, and what am I going to protect myself from? And you can picture yourself in oil and have what you don't like slide off of you. You can picture yourself in this bubble and you decide what you allow in, what kind of energy, because you really do attracts like. So if you're going for negative, you're going to attract negative. If you're going for positive, you're going to get that frequency. So you get to decide what you allow in and what you want to bounce off. So
Mm-hmm.
that's another step in really protecting yourself in a way that's not the armor, that's actually self-sabotaging.
Yes.
And you will encounter these karmic cycles if you don't break them.
Yeah.
So you will keep finding yourself in that situation. And when people are like, I just don't understand how this keeps happening, it's because you're not learning the lesson, you're not breaking down the armor, and you're not breaking this contract or
Mm-hmm.
whatever allowed this armor to be there in place. So start with learning to trust yourself, go back to the things that make you feel joy and feel free and like yourself, and start to understand yourself, put those boundaries in, and magic is literally going to unfold.
Absolutely. We are here to accept your authentic self and to show up as our authentic selves here. And, I think the more that we continue to have these conversations and, hopefully share some of our stories, that you find it to be relatable and that just understand that it doesn't happen overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. So, take the exercises that make sense to you, try them out. And if they don't, then you're still listening to your intuition, and that's even better. But I want to just invite everybody, to embrace these sides of yourself, because it is so magical, and it can be really, really overwhelming, and it can be a lot of hard work, but it doesn't have to feel like that all the time. It also can be fun, and it can be learning even new things about yourself that you didn't even know either, that you kind of find along the way. So yeah, I'm grateful for everyone for listening and joining us on this journey.
Yes. And face your fear. I know it's scary to face yourself head on, but you face it by you deal with it by facing it head on, and you start to motivate yourself by doing. So that's how you become authentic and start this process. And yeah, take whatever you want from this, and thank you for listening. And we are here if you want to reach out and have any questions, want to work with us. And thanks again for listening.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.